Elara, back in her small, cold quarters, ignored the throbbing protest in her muscles. The official Academy data pad on her desk was a monument to her failings, its screen displaying a cascade of subpar grades. But beside it, almost defiantly, a personal, heavily encrypted datapad flickered to life, illuminating a complex diagram, an elegant, lethal dance of an ancient, forgotten Terran combat art. A voice, synthesized and calm, a familiar counterpoint to the chaos in her life, emanated from the device. Phase 1 of analysis complete, Elara. The alien combat forms show predictable energy signatures and recovery lags. This was Unit 734, a compact maintenance bot she'd ingeniously repurposed, her silent ally, affectionately nicknamed Sparky. Elara's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white. "They think I'm weak, Sparky," she whispered, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "Let's show them what Terran weakness can truly do." Commander Valerius, in his crystalline arrogance, had essentially signed her death warrant, metaphorically speaking, with his dismissals and disdain. What he, and indeed the entire Apex military spire, couldn't possibly know was that Elara Vance was on the verge of unearthing combat secrets buried for millennia on Lost Terra, secrets that would make their rigid doctrines seem like child's play. And so, the midnight training began. Each night, as the sprawling alien metropolis of Apex Spire descended into its artificial twilight, Elara would slip like a ghost through the dimly lit, echoing corridors. Her destination, the deserted primary simulation chamber, a gleaming cathedral of alien technology. With Sparky officially disabling the omnipresent surveillance systems, the chamber became her secret dojo. "Ready for calibration, Sparky?" Elara would murmur, her breath misting in the cool, recycled air. Sparky's single optical sensor would glow a soft, reassuring blue. "Affirmative, Elara." Tonight's regimen, Terran endurance conditioning and comparative analysis of the Varroanian death coil versus your unorthodox alternatives. The contrast was stark, almost laughable. The gleaming, sterile alien tech of the simulation chamber, designed to drill cadets in established, brute force combat forms like the Varroanian death coil, now played host to the ancient, fluid, and deceptive martial arts of a forgotten Earth. Forms like Serpent's Coil, a Terran art focused on throws and joint locks reminiscent of old judo, or the rapid, close-quarter strikes of Iron Willow style, an echo of Wing Chun, were nothing like the Academy's rigidly structured, power-centric curriculum. Elara pushed her smaller frame to its absolute limits, her movements, initially hesitant, growing in precision and deadly grace with each grueling session. Sweat plastered her dark hair to her forehead, her lungs burned, but her eyes held a relentless fire. Between physical exertions, Elara would immerse herself in holographic projections, ghosts of ancient Terran warriors flickering in the dim light. Her ancestors. They had fought vastly different wars, against different horrors, with none of the advanced weaponry or innate physical advantages of the Cthar or Xylos. They didn't have Cthar's natural armor or Xylos's bioenergy blasts, Sparky, she'd say, tracing the lines of a Terran warrior's stance. They couldn't just overpower. They had to be smarter. More unpredictable. They had to use their minds as much as their bodies. Sparky's processors were a soft counterpoint to her quiet intensity. Analysis of provided Terran historical data suggests a combat doctrine based on exploiting psychological weaknesses, biomechanical blind spots, and leveraging an opponent's aggression. Fascinatingly inefficient by current galactic standards, which prioritize overwhelming force, yet, Elara, these methods could be potentially devastating if truly unexpected. Then came the first tangible taste of it, a fragile bloom of hope. Elara loaded a simulation against a Cthar-type opponent, its holographic form massive and intimidating, just like the real cadets who tormented her daily. The hologram charged, a roar of simulated fury. Instead of bracing for impact or attempting a futile block, Elara moved. She flowed. A subtle shift of weight, a dip of her shoulder, a core tenet of serpent's coil, and she used the Kthar hologram's own massive momentum against it. The alien avatar found itself sailing through the air, crashing heavily to the simulated deck. It was clumsy at first. Very clumsy. She was thrown around more than once. But she repeated the sequence, again and again, Sparky providing micro-adjustments to her technique, refining her timing, her balance. Their strength, it's a weapon, she murmured, wiping a bead of sweat that traced a path through the grime on her determined face. A weapon I can turn against them. Sparky's optical sensor pulsed. Acknowledged, Elara. Your success rate against standard Kthar frontal assault patterns has increased by 12%. Intriguing progress. 12%. It wasn't much. But it was a start. It was proof. Fueled by this small victory, Elara began to build her arsenal. She delved deeper, incorporating more forgotten Terran techniques. The swift, economical, close-quarter strikes of Iron Willow style began to feel less foreign, her hands and feet moving in patterns alien to the spire but deeply resonant with something ancient within her. She practiced the brutal, almost savage efficiency of Panther's Claw, a Terran system developed for desperate survival, what her ancestors had called Krav Maga. More than just techniques, she focused relentlessly on endurance, her Terran physiology, so often derided as fragile, proving surprisingly resilient. She pushed through multiple simulations, session after session, long after any Kthar or Xylos cadet, with their reliance on burst power and subsequent recovery periods, would have collapsed from fatigue. Their power is finite, Sparky, she panted one night, leaning against the cool wall of the sim chamber, her body aching but her spirit soaring. My will isn't. Each successful simulation, each small refinement, was another whisper of defiance against the monolithic certainty of the apex military spire. Days blurred into weeks, each one a careful balancing act. During official drills, Elara continued to perform just adequately, a ghost in the machine. She scraped by, avoiding outright failure but never daring to excel, meticulously masking her burgeoning, secret capabilities. The condescending glances and muttered insults continued, but they fueled her nocturnal resolve rather than quenched it. Then, one unexpectedly humid afternoon, Commander Valerius, his crystalline form seeming to absorb and refract the ambient light with particular intensity, announced a dynamic sparring assessment for the junior cadets. His eyes, like chips of cold, blue ice, seemed to linger on Elara for a fraction of a second too long. A chill traced its way down her spine. Cadet Vance, his voice boomed, silencing the training hull. You will spar Senior Cadet Draken. A collective gasp, a wave of shocked, excited murmurs, rippled through the assembled cadets. Draken. The scaled, four-armed terror of the senior class, a champion renowned for his brutal efficiency, smirked from across the hull, his numerous razor-sharp claws extending with a soft, menacing click. This wasn't an assessment. This felt like a public execution. The silence in the vast, circular arena was absolute, a thick, suffocating blanket smothering the usual cacophony of apex military spire. Elara Vance, the Terran runt, the Academy's walking punchline, stood alone on the stark white combat mat. Opposite her, a hulking shadow detached itself from the waiting alcoves, Draken, the Academy's four-armed nightmare, a senior cadet whose brutality was legend. Everyone, from the lowest-ranked grunt to the glittering array of instructors in the observation deck, expected a slaughter. A quick, messy end to the Terran experiment. They were about to get a war. Commander Valerius, his crystalline form radiating an icy authority, had ordered this sparring match. But the glint in his multifaceted eyes, the subtle tightening around his vocal emitters, told a different story. This was a lesson. A very public, very final lesson. The other cadets, a vibrant, intimidating menagerie of the galaxy's warrior species, buzzed with a mixture of cruel anticipation and morbid curiosity. Whispers slithered through the stands, "He'll tear her apart. Poor little Terran. Should have stayed on her dirt bowl." Draken, massive and scaled, a predatory gleam in his reptilian eyes, confidently strode onto the mat. His 4 powerful arms flexed, each ending in razor-sharp claws that scraped lightly against the reinforced surface, sending shivers down the spines of even seasoned cadets. He loomed over Alara, a mountain of muscle and armored hide. "Try not to break too easily, Terran," he sneered, his voice a gravelly rumble that promised pain. "I'd hate to stain my claws unnecessarily." Alara simply stood there. Small, yes. Outmatched, undeniably. But still. Her expression was unreadable, a carefully constructed mask of calm that hid the frantic calculations and the steady thrum of Unit 734, Sparky, feeding her tactical updates through a near-invisible neural link. Valerius's voice, sharp as a shard of ice, cut through the charged atmosphere. "Begin." Draken didn't hesitate. He moved with a speed that belied his bulk, expecting to end the farce in seconds. A blur of motion, a whirlwind of 4 clawed limbs aimed to pulverize the insignificant human. Overwhelming speed. Crushing power. That was the Academy way. But Alara moved too. She didn't try to match his impossible strength, didn't attempt to block the unblockable. She flowed. Like water around a boulder, like smoke through a closing fist. Her smaller size, once her greatest shame, became her advantage. She ducked under a sweeping strike that would have decapitated a lesser opponent, weaved inside a crushing embrace, a blur of motion that seemed to defy the spire's rigid combat geometry. The crowd gasped. A few choked on their insults. This wasn't the clumsy, struggling cadet from the obstacle course. This was something else. Something unexpected. Draken, his initial confident assault meeting nothing but empty air and a faint scent of terrified Terran, let out a guttural growl of frustration. His eyes, moments before filled with contemptuous amusement, now held a flicker of surprise. "Stand and fight, coward." He roared, his voice echoing through the suddenly less certain arena. "Face me like a warrior." His pride was pricked. This was taking too long. Then, Alara saw it. A microsecond delay in Draken's multi-limb coordination, a fractional overextension in his third arm's lunge, an infinitesimal window of opportunity Sparky's relentless analytical processes had predicted. Now, Alara. Exploit the kinetic chain imbalance. Sparky's synthesized voice was cool and precise in her mind. She slipped inside his ferocious, flailing reach, a daring, almost suicidal move. Her movements were a flurry of motion, too quick for most eyes to follow, not powerful by Academy standards, but brutally precise. 3 sharp, stinging strikes, aimed not at Draken's thick, armored hide, but at an almost invisible joint complex in his primary striking arm's shoulder, a vulnerable point identified during countless hours of her clandestine nightly studies, poring over alien anatomical charts Sparky had acquired. Draken roared, a sound of pure agony and utter surprise, stumbling back a step. His primary arm hung oddly limp. A single drop of alien blood, dark purple and viscous like crude oil, spattered onto the pristine white mat. Gasps turned to stunned silence. Elara Vance, the Terran, had drawn first blood from Draken. The victory, however fleeting, came at a heavy price. Before Elara could press any advantage, before she could even fully register her small, shocking success, Draken, enraged beyond reason and abandoning all semblance of Academy form, retaliated with a wild, desperate slash of his remaining functional claws. Pain, white-hot and searing, exploded through Elara's left arm. Her uniform tore, fabric parting like paper, and warm Terran blood, so very red against the alien backdrop, welled from a deep gash. Enough. Commander Valerius's voice was a thunderclap, his crystalline form practically vibrating with fury as he stormed onto the mat, his very presence radiating disapproval. Pathetic display. Vance, your technique is a mockery of everything this Academy stands for. You fight like a cornered street rat, not a soldier of the Galactic Defense Force. He completely ignored Draken's uncontrolled rage, his blatant disregard for combat protocol, his focus solely on Elara's unorthodox, effective, style. The fact that she had not only survived but had also injured one of the Academy's top cadets was an affront to his entire worldview. Report to my office, Cadet. He snarled, his gaze promising retribution. Your future at this institution is now in serious jeopardy. Draken, clutching his injured arm, glared at Elara with pure, unadulterated hatred. She had not just hurt him, she had embarrassed him. And in the hyper-competitive, honor-bound culture of Apex Spire, that was a far graver wound. The other cadets, their initial shock quickly morphing into renewed contempt, now openly sneered. The Terran had gotten lucky. And she was about to pay for it. In Commander Valerius's stark, intimidating office, the crystalline instructor loomed over his polished obsidian desk, his body shimmering with cold, contained disapproval. The air was thick with unspoken condemnation. Your adaptive methods are undisciplined, chaotic, and frankly, dangerous, Cadet Vance, Valerius stated, his voice devoid of any warmth. They have no place in a structured military environment. You will adhere strictly to standard Academy combat doctrine. Effective immediately. Or, his voice dropped, each word a chip of ice, you will be expelled by the end of the week. There are no second chances for Terrans here, Cadet. None. Elara met his gaze, her own surprisingly steady despite the throbbing pain in her bandaged arm and the crushing weight of his ultimatum. She could almost feel Sparky running probability calculations, the odds of her survival, her success, plummeting with each passing second. But something hardened within her, a core of Terran defiance that refused to break. Sir, she said, her voice quiet but firm, what if standard doctrine is incomplete? Valerius's crystalline hand slammed down on the desk with a crack that echoed the fracturing of Elara's future. Out! He roared, his composure finally cracking, his crystalline facets flashing with anger. Consider your options very carefully, Cadet Vance. Back in her small, cold quarters, the threat of expulsion hung over her like a guillotine. Elara angrily replayed the scene in her mind, Valerius's dismissive words, Draken's hateful glare. She brought up Sparky's interface. Valerius wants me to break, she said, her voice tight with a cold fury she hadn't known she possessed. He wants me to fail his way. Sparky's optical sensor pulsed steadily. The preliminary combat trials are scheduled for next week, Elara, the bot stated, displaying new data packets on her screen. 3 opponents, of increasing rank in diverse species. Failure in any match means automatic dismissal from the Apex military spire. Success, is statistically improbable under current Academy combat parameters, given your physiological profile and the established bias against your methods. Elara looked at the holographic footage of her fight with Draken. At the moment her unorthodox strike had landed, the surprise and pain in the alien's eyes. Then she looked at the complex Terran combat schematics still shimmering on her other datapad. A grim, dangerous smile touched her lips. Statistically improbable, Sparky. She murmured, a new, steely light in her eyes. It's time to rewrite the parameters. They want a show. I'll give them one they'll never forget. Back in her small, cold quarters, the threat of expulsion from Apex military spire hung over Elara Vance like a physical weight, a guillotine poised to drop. She had replayed Commander Valerius's dismissive words, Draken's hateful glare, 1,000 times. Angrily, she brought up Unit 734's interface, the calm, logical presence of Sparky, a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. Valerius wants me to break, she stated, her voice tight with a cold fury she hadn't known she possessed, a dangerous edge honing itself within her. He wants me to fail his way. Sparky's optical sensor pulsed with a steady, reassuring light. The preliminary combat trials are scheduled for next week, Elara, the bot stated, its synthesized voice devoid of emotion as it displayed new data packets on her screen. 3 opponents, of increasing rank and diverse species. Failure in any match means automatic dismissal from the Apex military spire. Success is statistically improbable under current Academy combat parameters, given your physiological profile and the established institutional bias against your methods. Elara's gaze flickered from the damning statistics to the holographic footage of her brief, brutal encounter with Draken. She saw the moment her unorthodox strike had landed, the flicker of surprise and pain in the hulking alien's eyes. Then, her eyes shifted to the complex Terran combat schematics still shimmering on her other datapad, Secrets of a Forgotten Earth. A grim, dangerous smile touched her lips, a chilling sight. Statistically improbable, Sparky. She murmured, a new, steely light dawning in her eyes, a reflection of the warrior she was becoming. It's time to rewrite the parameters. They want a show. Oh, I'll give them one they'll never, ever forget. 3 champions, 3 supposedly impossible fights, 1 desperate chance for the Terran joke to survive. The Apex military spire called it the preliminary trials. Elara Vance, with ice in her veins and forgotten Terran ghosts at her back, simply called it Tuesday. The main arena of the spire buzzed with a palpable energy, a mixture of anticipation and bloodlust. Cadets from every known warrior species in the Galactic Federation crammed the tiered seating, their varied forms creating a chaotic, vibrant tapestry. Commander Valerius, his crystalline body seeming to absorb and then refract the harsh arena lights into 1,000 dazzling, intimidating shards, announced the rules from the central dais, his voice amplified to fill the vast space. Victory will be achieved by submission or incapacitation of the opponent. Standard Academy regulations apply. His gaze, cold and impartial, or so it seemed, swept across the assembled cadets before briefly, almost imperceptibly, settling on Elara. She stood alone near the entry portal, calm and utterly focused, a small, solitary figure in her plain blue uniform. Ready. Her first opponent was Cadet Novan, an energy being from Cygnus X-1, his vaguely humanoid form crackling with contained power, a nimbus of azure light dancing around his translucent limbs. He was ranked solidly in the middle of their class, known for overwhelming opponents with rapid, disorienting bursts of raw energy. As the match began, Novan launched forward, unleashing a volley of quick energy pulses, each one potent enough to stagger Akthar. The crowd leaned forward, expecting the Terran's clumsy display from the obstacle course, anticipating her swift, electrified demise. But Alara didn't stumble. She wasn't clumsy. Remembering Sparky's detailed analysis of Novan's unique energy cycle, the telltale pre-discharge flicker, the mandatory fractional second refractory period between bursts, she moved. Not with explosive speed, but with a constant, flowing pattern, a Terran dance of evasion that made her an impossible target. She was never where Novan's energy blasts were aimed, always a step ahead, a whisper of motion. The crowd, initially jeering, slowly fell into a stunned, disbelieving silence. This wasn't the same Terran. She wasn't just surviving, she was dictating the terms. Just as Sparky had predicted, Novan's energy cycle would dip, needing to reset, Alara struck. Not with power, but with surgical precision. 3 lightning-fast, targeted hits with her reinforced knuckles to almost invisible vulnerable nodes on Novan's containment field, points Sparky's scans had painstakingly identified. Novan's azure form flickered violently, destabilized, and then he simply dropped, his energy dimming to a faint shimmer on the mat. Commander Valerius's voice, when it finally came, carried an undeniable note of surprise, a crack in his icy facade. "Victory, Cadet Vance." Confused, astonished murmurs rippled through the arena. From his position on the dais, Valerius leaned forward, just slightly, an almost imperceptible flicker within his crystalline form. Was it intrigue? Or annoyance? Alara couldn't tell. Next came Cadet Shard, a Xylosian, a crystalline being much like Commander Valerius himself, ranked in the demanding upper quarter of their class. His natural armor, a beautiful but terrifying lattice of razor-edged crystal, made him nearly impervious to standard physical attacks. If Novan was a test of her timing, Shard was a test of her strategy against a walking fortress. The audience, their earlier shock now replaced by a tense, almost fearful curiosity, watched with rapt attention. Alara's first victory could have been luck, a fluke. But could she repeat it against an opponent so clearly designed for brutal, attritional warfare? The match began. Shard, confident in his invulnerability, moved with the perfect, textbook academy forms, powerful, direct, and utterly predictable. Each strike was a hammer blow, each defense flawless by the Spire's standards. But Alara didn't try to meet his overwhelming strength directly. She flowed around him like water, her movements a confusing, mesmerizing blend of Terran styles that defied alien comprehension. Shard's perfect form, his rigid adherence to doctrine, became his undoing. His attacks, while powerful, were telegraphed, easily anticipated by Alara's adaptive combat sense, honed by Sparky's algorithms. She targeted not his armored exterior, but the infinitesimal gaps in his crystal lattice, the almost microscopic pauses between his movements, the subtle flex points in his crystalline joints. Shard tried to adjust, to counter her bewildering, alien movements, but centuries of rigid Xylosian combat training worked against him. He was a fortress, yes, but a fortress built on unyielding principles, now facing an opponent who fought by no known rules, no understandable pattern. The crystalline cadet, unable to cope, stumbled, overbalanced, and then fell, his own rigid momentum his enemy. "Victory, Cadet Vance," Valerius announced, his voice now carefully neutral, betraying nothing. The arena, however, was buzzing. Cadets were on their feet, shouting, pointing. This was no fluke. Her final opponent was Senior Cadet Scythe, a Krellian, his entire exoskeleton lined with shimmering, monomolecular blades. He was, without a doubt, one of the most dangerous hand-to-hand fighters in the entire academy. He had never, ever, lost a preliminary trial. As Scythe stepped onto the mat, He offered Alara a chilling smirk, his multifaceted eyes glinting. He'd watched her previous matches, analyzed her strange, flowing movements. She was still just a Terran. Still bound by human limitations. He would end this. Quickly. Scythe attacked with blinding, blade-edged speed, a whirlwind of silver death. But where others saw only human limitations, Alara, guided by Sparky's ceaseless calculations, had found Terran advantages. She matched his speed not with brute power, she had none to match, but with continuous, unpredictable motion, a relentless, adaptive flow that denied him the crucial setup for his most devastating, multi-bladed attacks. Scythe's frustration grew with each near miss, each perfectly timed evasion. He had trained for years to fight academy styles, to counter established forms, not this fluid, chaotic, Terran dance. He overcommit, a desperate, sweeping slash designed to cleave her in two. But Alara, anticipating the move through Sparky's predictive modeling of Krellian desperation tactics, was already behind him, using his own ferocious momentum to send him tumbling. Scythe crashed hard to the mat, his own blades narrowly missing his vital spots. Victory, Cadet Vance. Preliminary trials complete. Valerius's voice cut through the stunned roar of the crowd. The arena erupted into utter chaos. Alara stood calmly in the center of the mat, her breathing steady, her expression composed. She met Commander Valerius's gaze across the pandemonium. And for the very first time, she saw not dismissal, not anger, but a flicker of something akin to profound, unsettling uncertainty in those crystalline depths. This Terran, this anomaly, wasn't just passing the trials. She was dismantling centuries of established combat doctrine before their very eyes. From the stands, a guttural roar of pure, unadulterated rage cut through the noise. Draken, his face a mask of fury, slammed his 4 massive fists onto the railing before him. This mockery cannot stand. He bellowed, his voice raw with wounded pride and disbelief. I demand a proper match against the Terran. Now. Commander Valerius surveyed the chaotic arena, then his gaze fixed on the enraged Draken, then, finally, on the small, inexplicably victorious Terran cadet who stood at the eye of the storm she had created. The apex military spire's most sacred traditions were being shredded, one unorthodox victory at a time. After a long, tense moment that stretched into an eternity, he made a decision, his voice cutting through the lingering uproar. Very well, Cadet Draken. A public demonstration match. Tomorrow, at high sun. Full combat regulations will be in effect. The news, relayed instantly across the Spire's comnet, hit the Academy like a meteor strike. This wasn't just a rematch, it was a battle for the very soul of their warrior institution. Later that night, in the quiet sanctuary of her quarters, Alara met Sparky's single, unwavering optical sensor. He expects me to be intimidated, Sparky, she said softly, her voice a low hum of anticipation. Or to finally break under the pressure of a full combat match against their reigning champion. Sparky whirred softly. Cadet Draken's combat data has been updated, Alara. He will be significantly faster this time, his attack patterns more aggressive, less predictable. He will not underestimate you again. Alara nodded slowly, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. Good, she whispered. Neither will I underestimate him. It's time, Sparky. It's time to show them the true, unyielding meaning of Terran persistence. Commander Valerius surveyed the chaotic arena from the command dais, his crystalline features unreadable. The apex military spire's most sacred traditions were being shredded by this. Terran. His gaze fixed first on the enraged Draken, whose bellows still echoed, then on Alara Vance, who stood small and defiant amidst the uproar. After a long, tense moment that stretched into an eternity, he made a decision, his amplified voice cutting through the lingering dim. "Very well, Cadet Draken. A public demonstration match will be scheduled. Tomorrow, at high sun. Full combat regulations will be in effect." The news, relayed instantly across the Spire's myriad comm channels, hit the Academy like a meteor strike. This wasn't just a rematch, it was a battle for the very soul of their warrior institution, a referendum on centuries of established combat doctrine. Later that night, in the quiet, metallic-smelling sanctuary of her tiny quarters, Alara met Unit 734's single, unwavering optical sensor. "He expects me to be intimidated, Sparky," she said softly, her voice a low hum of anticipation, the adrenaline from the trials still thrumming beneath her skin. "Or perhaps to finally break under the pressure of a full combat match against their reigning champion, fought under their rules." Sparky whirred softly, a series of complex equations and combat probabilities flickering across its internal displays, unseen by Alara. "Cadet Draken's combat data has been updated, Alara, incorporating observations from your trial matches. He will be significantly faster this time. His attack patterns will be more aggressive, less predictable. He will not underestimate you again." Alara nodded slowly, a ghost of a dangerous smile playing on her lips. "Good," she whispered, her eyes reflecting the dim light of the datapad displaying Terran battle schematics. "Neither will I underestimate him. It's time, Sparky. It's time to show them the true, unyielding meaning of Terran persistence. One Terran. One alien champion. An entire galaxy, or so it felt to Alara, holding its collective breath. This wasn't just a fight, it was the day the definition of warrior was rewritten in blood and, quite possibly, fractured steel. The combat arena at Apex Military Spire was packed beyond its considerable capacity the next day. Cadets of every conceivable species, scaled, furred, chitinous, energy-based, crowded the stands, their myriad forms a vibrant, restless sea of anticipation. Some were there to see Draken, their champion, restore the Academy's tarnished honor, to brutally crush the Terran upstart and her unsettling, unorthodox ways. Others, a smaller but growing faction, harbored a secret, almost heretical hope, to witness another display of impossible Terran adaptability, another miracle from the girl who shouldn't exist in their world. Alara Vance stood on one side of the gleaming white mat, looking impossibly small, a solitary figure of calm focus amidst the baying crowd. On the other side, Cadet Draken was a mountain of controlled rage and gleaming, obsidian metallic scales. His 4 powerful arms flexed, razor-sharp claws, each the length of a Terran forearm, extending with a soft, menacing snikt. He was fury incarnate, the pinnacle of alien predatory design. Commander Valerius, his crystalline form radiating an almost palpable aura of gravitas, took his position on the command dais. His voice, amplified, boomed across the arena. "This will be a full combat match. Standard Academy regulations apply. Combatants, prepare yourselves. Begin." Draken, learning from his previous humiliation and Alara's startling trial fights, didn't rely solely on the Academy's revered, predictable forms. He exploded into motion, a terrifying fusion of raw speed, overwhelming power, and brutal, unpredictable attack sequences. He was a whirlwind of claws and fury, determined to crush Alara, to eradicate the memory of her earlier successes. The crowd roared with every near miss, every devastating strike that whistled inches from Alara's form. She was constantly on the defensive, a desperate dance on the edge of annihilation. But Alara wasn't just dodging, her mind was a supercooled processor, analyzing, calculating, Sparky's exhaustive pre-fight analysis and real-time probability streams a silent chorus in her neural pathways. The intensity was crushing, the air crackled with Draken's rage and the sheer kinetic force of his attacks. It felt like she was perpetually on the verge of being overwhelmed, a single misstep from oblivion. Yet, she didn't break. Elara didn't meet his irresistible force with her own easily overcome resistance. She became water, flowing around his onslaught, a ghost in the machine of his fury. She used his aggression, his raw power, against him. Her movements were a seamless, ever-shifting blend of ancient Terran martial arts, a tapestry of feints, parries, and evasions that never allowed Draken to lock onto a predictable pattern. She was exploiting the briefest openings, the infinitesimal pauses between his savage attacks, striking not with overwhelming force, but with pinpoint precision at nerve clusters, at vulnerable joint weak points, targets that Sparky's detailed anatomical scans of Draken species had helped her map, points that no standard academy training regimen would ever identify, let alone target. "Fight me properly, Terran maggot." Draken bellowed, his voice hoarse with exertion and mounting frustration. His perfectly honed attacks, which should have demolished her, were becoming subtly sloppier, his control fraying as his psychological state deteriorated under her relentless, untouchable defense. Elara, mid-evasion, her voice surprisingly calm amidst the storm of his assault, replied, "I am fighting, Draken. Just not your way." The turning point came during a particularly savage flurry. Draken, desperate to land a decisive blow, launched a four-armed combination of devastating power. Elara, in a move that seemed insane to the onlookers, did something utterly unexpected. She allowed a glancing blow from one of Draken's secondary arms to connect with her specially reinforced, but still vulnerable, shoulder pad. A calculated risk, a terrifying gamble. The impact sent a shock wave of pain through her, but she used the kinetic energy, a principle as old as Terra itself, to pivot, to gain an impossible, unexpected angle. For a split second, Draken believed he'd finally landed a solid, crushing hit. A flicker of savage triumph lit his reptilian eyes. It was a trap. Inside his guard, within the whirlwind of his own attack, Elara unleashed a lightning-fast series of precise, debilitating strikes. Her knuckles, hardened by months of relentless training, targeted a previously unconsidered series of nerve points along his exposed torso and the underbelly of his primary striking arm. The crowd gasped as one. Draken stumbled, a choked gasp escaping him, one of his massive primary arms dropping limply to his side, useless. Impossible. A Xylosian instructor, known for his rigid adherence to combat doctrine, shouted from the observation deck, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Those aren't recognized Academy strike points." Commander Valerius, his crystalline form utterly rigid, his voice resonating with a strange, new inflection, corrected him. "No, Instructor Krell. They are not. They are Terran strike points." And in that moment, a memory seemed to flicker within Valerius's multifaceted mind, a long-forgotten skirmish on a border world, an unconventional tactic employed by a species long thought extinct, a tactic he had dismissed at the time, until now. Draken, roaring in a mixture of agony and uncomprehending fury, abandoned all pretense of technique, of training, of everything the Academy had ever taught him. He charged mindlessly, a wounded, 4-ton behemoth intent on annihilation. This, Elara knew, was the moment. The exact scenario Sparky's predictive algorithms, cross-referencing Draken's psychological profile with his species' known rage state responses, had anticipated. She didn't try to stop his charge. She guided it. Using his own immense, uncontrolled momentum, adding her own precisely timed and leveraged force in a devastating Terran throw, a technique as beautiful as it was brutal, she sent the massive alien champion airborne. The mighty Draken, the pride of Apex Spire, crashed to the reinforced mat with enough concussive force to send spiderweb cracks radiating across its surface. Before he could even begin to recover, before his stunned mind could process what had happened, Alara was there. Not with a weapon, not with a killing blow, but with her fingers pressing with unerring accuracy against 3 critical nerve junctions on his thick, scaled neck, points she had discovered during countless hours of poring over alien anatomical charts, points Sparky had confirmed were universal paralytic triggers for his species. Draken tried to move, to fight, to even twitch a claw. His body wouldn't respond. Temporary, precise, and utterly humiliating paralysis. The arena, moments before a cauldron of roaring sound, fell into an absolute, stunned silence. Every eye, every optical sensor, was fixed on the impossible scene, Alara Vance, the Terran, the anomaly, standing over their fallen champion. Commander Valerius, after a long, pregnant moment that seemed to stretch into an eternity, finally spoke. His voice, when it came, was devoid of its usual coldness, carrying instead a new, almost respectful tone. Match concluded. Victory, Cadet Alara Vance. As the temporary paralysis began to wear off, Alara, with a gesture of unexpected grace, helped the stunned and unsteady Draken to his feet. The mockery in the massive alien's eyes was gone, replaced by a dawning, horrified, and deeply unsettling understanding. How? He whispered, his voice a hoarse rasp. Alara simply looked at him, her expression unreadable. Terra remembers how to fight the strong, Draken, she said, her voice quiet but carrying the weight of millennia. We call it adaptation.